Baker Show. Seeking answers to age-old questions. Deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be out there. A big, huge, massive, warm welcome to this, the Kev Baker Show. I'm your host, Kev Baker, and tonight I'm joined by my good friend and my co-host, Mr. Johnny Whistles. And guys, what a Monday show we have got lined up for you. This show has been a long time in coming, but I have just got one of these feelings, Johnny, that this is going to be a high mark for the Kev Baker Show and Truth Frequency Radio. But before we go anywhere, how are you doing, man?
Well, I'm doing fantastic, Kev. Really looking forward to this one. It's got a full Scottish flavour to it tonight. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And before you head into the back cave, I want to give a big, massive KBS shout out to my mum out there. That's right, my mum is tuned in live tonight because the topics that we are going into, well, guess what? It's thanks to her that I was ever getting into these topics at all myself. So then, Johnny, before we go to tonight's wonderful guest, and I cannot wait, please give these wonderful listeners out there their much-deserved shout-out.
I will do, Kev. And we'll start off with our brother from another mother, Mr. Joe Joseph. We'll get Penelope. We'll get Adam. Angie Marie, Brendan. We'll get Carol, Caroline, Charlie, Chris. We've got Freeman. We'll get Claire, Darryl, Edward, Eric of Oregon, Helen, Iferian, Italma. We'll get Jeremy, John Taylor, and John Teeter was here. Karen, Kenny. We've got Kev, Lucky Man, Mark John. We've got Nancy, myself, Papa Bear, Sam, Scottish John, and very big happy St. Andrew's Day to you too, brother. We've got Sozu, we've got Star the Oracle, TFR Wiki, Time Lord, we've got Tony Phillips, and we've got Wiggle as the very last one there, Kev.
Absolutely fantastic. So you are all tuned in tonight to listen to our brilliant guest. And you know, tonight's topic, it's something that we are all going to think about at some stage. And with all the listeners on TFR, I know this is a topic that we've all thought about and spoke about before. What does happen after we die? And tonight we're going to be joined by author Tricia J. Robertson. And this is a very special day for Tricia because her second book has just hit the shelves. And this is called More Things You Can Do When You're Dead. And this is a follow-on from her first book, Things You Can Do When You're Dead. And just a little bit about Tricia here. She's a former teacher of mathematics and physics. Tricia is a long-term council member, past vice president, and immediate past president of the Scottish Society for Psychical Research. She's a tutor for the Department of Adult and Continuing Education, that's something known as DACE, at the University of Glasgow. And in conjunction with Professor Archie Roy, she provided a session program of 20 two-hour lectures per session for DACE in a series which was entitled An In-Depth Study of Psychical Research. This course has now been running for 6 years. The Paranormal, What is the Evidence? And in addition to 29 years of experience in investigating spontaneous cases, Tricia has appeared on various radio and TV programs and has been invited over many years to speak to varied organisations throughout the UK. Now, she's written the foreword to Dr. Mark Ireland's highly successful book, Soul Shift, an endorsement in Bill Caspari's book, The Galilean Pendulum. What? Spit that one out, Kev. And some of her comments are on the back cover of Trevor Hamilton's book, Tell My Mother I Am Not Dead. So then, at long last, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Tricia Robertson to the Kev Baker Show. Tricia, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Pleased to meet you all. I hope we have a nice night tonight.
This is going to be absolutely fantastic, Tricia. And like I was saying at the top of the show there, on Truth Frequency Radio, and this show in particular, these are the kind of topics that we love to sit down and discuss. But myself, Johnny, and a lot of the guys that come on and off the show, we're merely speculating a lot of the time. We're trying to put 2 and 2 together and usually hitting 5 or 6. And tonight it's going to be nice to have some scientific evidence into something that a lot of people up until very recently used to consider X-File type stuff. So Tricia, tell us, how did you get into this line of research?
Well, everybody asks me that, and the sad answer is I don't really know. Just have an intellectual interest. I had no axe to grind whatsoever when I started. I had no religious background really at all, which is actually a very good thing when you're looking at these things. Just an intellectual interest, and gradually when I began to see the amount of evidence that's there and has been there for the past 100 years, you begin to think, oh my goodness, look at all this evidence, and why do we not know about it? And the reason we don't know about most of it is that a lot of it is suppressed by media in general, the politicians, governments, the religious organizations, etc., the main ones, they don't want you to know. But anyway, apart from that, you were talking about proof. This is why Archie Roy and I did the lessons at Glasgow University. And Archie actually died a couple of years ago. So I thought to myself, right, what am I going to do with all this information, this fantastic information that we have? And I thought the best thing for me to do is to try and put some of it into a book along with, my own experiences. So that's why the book was written, first of all, was to show people there is evidence out there. And the first book especially is written for you, the man in the street, that doesn't know what to make of it. That's exactly what it's written for. So that you can say, right, Tricia's told me that. That's the evidence. I can go and research it there. I can find out more, because in the book, although I tell you things, I give you references where you can go and find out more for yourself. It's not just me saying this is the case. I would never do that. Because in this life, there are 2 types of evidence. There's mathematical and scientific evidence, where you can repeat the same mathematical formula. You can repeat the same scientific experiment and you'll always get the same result. So that's scientific proof, mathematical proof. But we also in this country accept, and in America and other countries, we accept another kind of proof. We accept proof in a court of law as beyond reasonable doubt. And that is what the good paranormal events come under, beyond reasonable doubt. If I show you the things that happen, and the only conclusion you can come to sometimes is this is beyond reasonable doubt. It's nothing normal as we understand it. I should also point out that psychical research is the considered study of all things paranormal in as scientific a manner as possible. It's not always possible, but as far as we can make it possible.
Oh, Tricia, are you still there? You've cut out. I think one of your cables came undone there by the sounds of it. Tricia? Okay, I'll try and reconnect with Tricia. But Johnny, wow, this is going to be absolutely phenomenal. Now, hopefully Are you back with us, Tricia? Yeah, I'll try and tell her to plug in our cables here.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, Kev.
It sounded like a cable had come out. Now, I don't know if Tricia can hear us or not, but Tricia's new book has come out today, and this book is called More Things You Can Do When You're Dead. Now then, hopefully we'll be able to get Tricia back on with us. Now, Tricia, if you can hear me, try and plug in your microphone again, or try and maybe restart the Skype, because I really don't want to lose this interview, Johnny.
No, definitely not, Kev. This is going to be great tonight, especially some of the research that Patricia has done has been phenomenal.
Now, I don't know what you've done there, Tricia, but keep playing with the wire, because it sounds like there's a loose connection or something there. Oh, there we are. Tricia?
Hello?
Hi, we hear you again. There we go. Oh, we've got spirits on the line.
That's very strange because I didn't move.
Well, you know what the thing is. See, because we sometimes cover topics like satanic ritual abuse, and we link it to things like Parliament. We sometimes get ghosts on the line, Tricia.
Well, we'll put it down to that, although I don't believe that.
Now, anyway, let's get back into this.
How far did I get before I was cut off?
Well, I was actually just about to cut in and ask you about your new book. Now then, your first book, obviously, it is a symptom of the fact that so many people are looking into this information right now because it was a roaring success. Now, you were saying with the Psychical Research Institute, what kind of topics or areas is it that you like to examine as evidence for life after death or some kind of continuation?
The main ones, are you still, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear now.
To give you an idea, the first book covers things like apparitions, where people can see people and talk to them, and they don't actually realise that they've died, and they find out later that person's actually dead. That happens quite a lot. Then there's a type of apparition, the see-through apparition, which some people might see. And then you have what you call poltergeist activity, where you might come in at night and things have been moved about in your house. And that's generally associated with someone who's recently passed. Generally, not always, but generally. Are you still with me? Yeah,
I'm still listening. Yeah. And when it comes to poltergeist, Tricia, is there usually a child's energy in the house?
I beg your pardon?
Is there usually a young child in the house in the poltergeist cases you've looked at?
No, not really.
You see, this is something we've heard before, Johnny, that these kind of cases, they usually happen around young people. And this is great to have Trish on because she's looked into all of this stuff.
It can. You sometimes find there is an adolescent child at puberty around these cases, but not. The trouble with poltergeist cases is they're divided into two things. We call it poltergeist cases because things move. But generally, the most common one is somebody in your family or a good friend, somebody has died, and you're breaking your heart because that person's gone. And they do their very best to let you know that they're still alive. And they can do that by interfering with their electricity. They can do that by trying to touch you and you feel things in your hair, or most commonly they try and move things about in the house. It's generally a small object that's connected with them that is seen to move. And it's not just an airy-fairy thing, it's something quite definite. But in all of that type of case, they're only trying to tell you, I'm okay, I'm here, and I'm absolutely fine. Now, there's examples of that in the first book. But there is another type of poltergeist case where you might have a disturbed teenager or a disturbed family, or an emotionally disturbed situation in which the activity appears to come from the living and not somebody that's departed. I speak about that in the first book as well. You've got to be very careful that the phenomena is as to where the phenomena may be coming from. Is it coming from the deceased, or is it coming from somebody that's still here? I also will talk about mediumship, where you get very good mediums that give you evidence that you don't even know, and you've got to go away and check, and that comes out to be correct. But one of the sort of gold standards of mediumship is a thing called a drop-in communicator, where people might be sitting in a circle week upon week, hoping to communicate with their mum, their dad, their auntie, Uncle Willie, whatever. And somebody comes in through the medium and gives their name, where they lived, how they died, all the rest of it. The medium doesn't know this person. The people sitting in the circle don't know the person. And then somebody, if they can be bothered, can go away later and check out if that person lived or not. Now, in the first book, I have a whole chapter on drop-in communicators, and they were studied by a colleague, Dr. Alan Gold, in England. Alan Gold fell heir to a whole lot of transcripts from a circle. And when he studied the transcripts, he found there were something like 24 people that communicated that nobody could account for. The medium didn't know them. The sitters didn't know them. And there was sufficient information in that for Alan Gold, who is a fastidious researcher, to go and research these people. And there's a bit about that actually in the second book as well. The information was so good that he could go and find out that these people existed. You couldn't find out the information in any one place. You had to, in one case, the case of Harry Stockbridge. Harry Stockbridge was a young soldier who died in the Second World War. And he came through this circle and gave his name. He gave Harry Stockbridge where he lived, what platoon he was in, all the rest of it. And he said, the date on my war memorial is incorrect. And he gave the next day to the day that was on the war memorial. So Alan Gold researched all of that, and he found out, yes, there was a man, Harry Stockbridge. He was lieutenant. He was Northumberland Fusiliers. He died, etc., in the same circumstances. And he found out, having gone to the War Office and other government departments, he found out that the date that the communicator gave of his death was correct, and the date in the war memorial was wrong. It was 1 day out. But it took him 4 sources to find that the communicator was right. And what you've got to ask yourself is, where did that information come from? The medium didn't know the information. The sitters didn't know the information. Alan Gold didn't know the information. And it was only when he approached the War Office, different army place, etc., he found that the communicator was correct and the War Office, the war memorial was wrong. Now, where did that information come from? So the drop-in communicator to me is one very good source of proof that when you die, you retain your memory and you know what's going on after you die. Now, and that's very important.
Tricia, would another medium by the name of Edgar Casey, would he fall into this kind of category?
Edgar Casey, there's a whole raft of libraries about Edgar Casey. I have to be honest and say I haven't read him extensively, but I believe Edgar Casey did do that sort of thing. Yes, I really don't know. I'd have to read all about Casey, but there are so many. It's not just one. This happened, but unfortunately, I should put a caveat in here. Mediumship is one way of looking at survival, but unfortunately, not all mediums are good mediums, and that is the problem. There's so many people nowadays are wannabes. They want to be up there within 6 months on a platform pontificating to contact someone that's passed over, and a lot of them, in fact, the majority of them are actually not that good, and that is quite sad.
Exactly. And this is my mum. She goes to see a lot of these named kind of big name mediums.
Oh, yes.
Now you get your TV ones as well.
Yes.
And I do believe there is really absolutely bona fide mediums out there. However, I fear they get lost in the abundance of these, snake oil sellers, Tricia.
Mm-hmm. Derek Acora.
Yeah, we could name hundreds of them. How do you feel when you see that kind of thing? Because it dilutes what's really, really important information.
Well, I don't want. I'm not going to name any names, obviously, because I know.
No, of course not.
People.
No.
But there are. I could name you 4 Scottish mediums. Oh no, 3 or 4 Scottish mediums, and certainly a couple of English mediums who are excellent, absolutely excellent. And these mediums actually they serve churches. Now, I should make it quite clear, if I didn't already, that psychical research, the study of the paranormal, has got nothing whatever to do with any religion. But if you believe in an afterlife, what I'm telling you should enhance your belief. And if you don't particularly believe in an afterlife, for example, the Captain Bob account in my first book was a true account. He came to myself and Archie Roy. He was a test pilot in the late 60s, because although we only hear about World War I, World War II, there's wars going on all the time, as you know. And Captain Bob, he was a test pilot for Phantoms. And he was such a good marksman as a test pilot. They sent him to America, to Miramar, to teach the Americans how to fly these jets and how to do target practice. And he flew off the Ark Royal, and he was a complete, marksman, an observer, absolutely fantastic observer. He did not believe in God. He didn't believe in anything. And he was the very one who met a solid apparition in Glasgow Airport of a young man whom he used to fly with years ago, and he didn't know that this man was dead. And it was only 2 days later that somebody plonked a paper down, and the observer, it was a Scotsman, and said, "You must know this man." And he saw a photograph of the man he had spoken to 2 days ago, and he was shocked. He was so shocked, he phoned up the airline the chap had been working for, and he was absolutely taken aback to find out he had died in Edinburgh, and his coffin was being brought through Glasgow Airport on a certain day when my Captain Bob, who I didn't know that was there in Glasgow Airport. The apparition came up, spoke to him. They had a relevant conversation to do with themselves. Then the guy who turned out to be the apparition said, I'll need to go now, I'm late for my flight. And it turned out that his coffin was coming through Glasgow airport at that time and going on to the plane to Stornoway, which is where the deceased person lived. Now, Archie Roy always said that the apparition probably came to speak to my Captain Bob, but I don't think so. I think in some way he didn't know he was dead and he was following his coffin up to Stornoway. Now,
Sounds like that.
What my Captain Bob, when he saw me, thought to himself, oh my God, he's lost a hell of a lot of weight. And that was all. He never thought any more about it. So Captain Bob got in touch with me. We went up to Glasgow Airport. We spoke to the head of security to see if we could get any CCTV, which we couldn't. And then my Captain Bob, we got him to phone the other chap's father in Stornoway because he knew him. And we found out that the chap who had died had lost 3 stone in weight in 6 months. So that was a kind of veridical thing that he thought, my God, he's lost a hell of a lot of weight. And he didn't even know the chap. He was only 38. He didn't know he was ill. And he certainly didn't know that he'd lost all this weight. So that in itself
and
never
Tricia,
did.
This doesn't tie into the scientific evidence again. This is more the other kind of evidence that we could use.
This is beyond reasonable doubt, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, it falls into something even like Occam's razor, where the most logical explanation...
That's right. Occam's razor said the most simplest explanation is usually the best. You know, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's very likely it's a duck.
Perfect.
But there were other things to do with times and loss of weight and you know how he died and all that. Once again, that's in the first book. So you've got things like apparitions, you've got drop-in communicators, you've got mediumship, you've got children who, from when they can speak about being someone else, and they give vast amount of information about their own personality, where they lived, all that sort of thing, which can be checked up on. And indeed, in the University of Virginia, there's a whole unit in which they have collected nearly 4,000 cases of children who, from when they can speak about a previous life and give such information that these lives can be checked up on.
And I've seen some programs that show in America that law enforcement sometimes even go to mediums and people who are able to contact the other side, for lack of a better term, Tricia. So these people put a lot of weight into the evidence that's coming back.
There seems to be police forces in general won't admit, certainly in this country, that they do that, but I think that they actually probably do. And there are 1 or 2 good American programs naming the medium, showing them that seem to be able to do that. There was a Dutchman called Gerard Quasse years ago who quite openly helped the police with their inquiries. He could locate people whether they were alive or dead, which was very strange. But he seemed to have the capacity to actually source these people exactly where they were. So these things can be done. You see, we think we're all separated from each other, but we're not really. We're all in the same boat, as it were. And some people just seem to have this capacity to tune in, if that's the right word, to whatever's going on around them.
It's like a radio. That's the way we always kind of describe it on here, Tricia. It's like the dial. We're tuned into a certain frequency, but either side of that, in the same space that we occupy just now, there is so much else going on that we're totally unaware of.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you bring the scientific kind of clout to all of this, because it is one thing, us speculating, and it's good to hear all these stories, but you actually do add the science to this. And that's why it's so important for listeners to take something from this. And we've all lost somebody dear to us, Johnny. And this kind of information...
Everybody has, yeah.
Yeah, this is so positive, John. And I know you want to jump in with a question here, Johnny.
But I would say, rather than keep using the word science, I'm evidence-based. I look for what is the evidence for A, B, C, or D. And I provide what I think looks like evidence. It's up to you to make up your mind if you accept that evidence or not. But, I mean, these are only a few topics I've touched on so far. I mean, you've got other things. Anyway, if John wants to ask a question just now, that's lovely.
Yeah, it was actually about Glasgow Uni, because, I mean, that's a very, very old place in itself. I got the opportunity to go around it because I was working with the people that do the floors in Glasgow Uni. And I almost, everywhere I turn, I always think that Harry Potter's going to come out somewhere. It's got that kind of look. But
yeah, the cloisters, yeah.
Is there any paranormal activity goes on in there? Because I couldn't find anything of note.
They do say the old building at the foot of University Avenue, that's the one near the park. They say that there's a grey lady goes about there, but I've never looked at that one myself.
There's
but
always a grey lady somewhere, Tricia.
There's always a grey lady.
We're almost up on the break. Where can people find your website and your new book? Well,
the website is www.Tricia Robertson, no J in it, just triciarobertson.weebly.com, weebly.com. New book just out today. Get them on Amazon, bookshops, iTunes, Kindle, all the usual suspects.
Absolutely fantastic. And listen, folks, we have still got one half to go with Tricia Robertson, so stay tuned. We'll be back on the other side. Coming up right after this show, our good friend, our brother, Joe Joseph, with the Freedom Link. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, everyone, to tonight's live broadcast of the Kev Baker Show, right here on your very favourite network, www.truthfrequencyradio.com. Now, tonight's guest is Tricia Robertson, the author of More Things You Can Do When You're Dead. And you can find Tricia's work at triciarobertson.weebly, that's weebly.com. Now, Johnny, before we go back to tonight's brilliant guest, you know, this is evidence that we really are listener-based. We're nothing without these listeners, John, and if it wasn't for one listener in particular, we wouldn't have had this show tonight. So I'll let you give this man a very special thank you.
Yeah, it's really a big shout-out goes out to Kieran Doran. That almost sounds like, there's a wee Kieran Doran. But anyway, but thanks very much for getting us in touch with Tricia, because this has been the kind of a show that Kev and I have been waiting for a long time. This is amazing, so can't wait to get back into it again.
Absolutely, and we are absolutely nothing without you listeners out there. So let's get back into this, because you all want to hear more from Tricia. Now, Tricia tonight is offering us evidence that there is more after we pass away. There is another side. There is an afterlife. And I'm keen to hear more of this evidence that Tricia has uncovered. So, Tricia, let's get right back into this, because I know there's a couple of topics in particular that you're really keen to share with the audience.
Well, there are so many topics, but this is a problem with psychical research. It's such a vast gamut of topics that we can only talk about one thing in a very small depth in this short time. But we've already spoken about apparitions, drop-in communicators, good mediumship. We've spoken about all of that. But there comes a thing too. There's paranormal healing, where people put their hands on people, and there is a thing called psychic surgery, where genuine people can put their hands on people and actually make them well. And these psychic surgeons, they say themselves, I'm not doing this, there's someone working through me. And one of the best books on psychic surgery is called Healing Hands. I talk about it in my book. And it's by a fireman who lived in England called George Chapman, who discovered that he could actually heal people. And as he developed this, a personality from the other side of life, shall we say, who was an ophthalmic surgeon in Moorfields Hospital, Dr. Lang, he came and worked through him. And his speciality, of course, was eyes, because he was an ophthalmic surgeon. And the book Healing Hands tells about a reporter who didn't believe a word of this, not a single word, until he was going blind himself. And his wife dragged him along to see George Chapman. Now, he went along very unwillingly and laughing as he went in the door. And he had this psychic operation, which was non-invasive, by the way, through this Dr. Lang. Now, when George Chapman was working, he was what you call entranced. His personality was out of the body, and the personality of Dr. Lang was working through him with all Dr. Lang's knowledge and expertise. And as the journalist lay there thinking it was a joke, he suddenly felt things happening behind his eyes, like jagging, like knitting needles behind his eyes. Then it became less of a joke. And as you go on reading the book, after that very day, his eyesight got better and better until now. He's got, it's not got 20/20 vision, but it's certainly a hell of a lot better than it was before.
Oh, wow.
Now, being of a very skeptical nature still, because we're all very skeptical, I'm skeptical until it's shown otherwise, he asked George Chapman if he could go through his patient files and contact the people. And he said, yes, quite happy to do that. And in this book, he tells you about all the patients he's contacted, all the wonderful work that was done. Now, George Chapman was a fireman, so he couldn't operate in anybody's eyes. And what they found was, if you went with another complaint, like a stomach or whatever, Chapman would allow another doctor to come through whose expertise was that particular thing. And the evidence in there is actually quite undeniable. Now, if you go to my website, I did a 5-year study of 2 psychic surgeons, and Gary Mannion and Nina Noland. And I've got a 64-page report on my website. You won't read it all at once, about patients that I have recorded with Gary Mannion and Nina. So that's something you can do on your own. If you want to do that, you can see that genuine, and I say again, genuine psychic surgery and healing can work. Just a genuine mediumship can be fantastic.
Now, Tricia, we've had a guest on before, and I'm so grateful that you've got a kind of scientific background, especially physics, because this guest spoke to us about something very similar to what you're speaking here, only they called it quantum healing.
Well, they can call it what you like. You can call it salt and pepper. It doesn't matter what you call it. But that they can call it that if they like. But the point is, the surgeon had the expertise of Dr. Lang. And it's sometimes in psychic surgery there are incisions, although they don't touch them. There are scar marks and incisions in the body when they're waking up the next morning in the place where the surgery took place. Quantum healing, what they're talking about, is a different thing. That's different to psychic surgery. There are many, many forms of, and well, I want to say supernatural healing, but things that we don't understand. But at the moment, I'm just talking about psychic surgery per se.
And if we think about this psychic surgery, I mean, think of the knowledge that is on this other side. This
Absolutely.
could be the answer to everything.
Mm.
No wonder this is so occulted from us, Tricia.
You see, the people keep calling this sort of thing occult. It's not scientific. It's just that we don't understand it. But, it's getting better. In my first book, and I'm not showing off here, and one of the praise in my first book was from a quantum physicist, Professor Bernard Carr. And Bernard Carr doesn't see any reason why quantum physics shouldn't come into this. Now, we're not saying that survival is quantum or digital. We're not saying that because we don't know. Nobody knows. I'm sure it has an electromagnetic component, but that's not provable. So you've got paranormal healing. You've got things like automatic writing, which probably most people will never heard of. Some people have the ability to hold a pen or a pencil over blank paper and write information that they could not possibly know within their remit. It's not within their education or their intelligence level. And I'd go into automatic writing, which sounds boring, but it's not, in the second book. And one of the greatest automatic writers was a man in Brazil called Chico Xavier, who was educated to primary six, we would call it. And this man, it was the year 2000, he was given his face on a stamp in Brazil because the people voted for him as the person of the century. Now, why would you put the face on a stamp of someone who was educated to primary six? Because this man had the gift of automatic writing. He could write with both hands different things at the same time. He has written 259 poems signed by 56 different poets. All the money he made from the books that he produced was given to as charity to the local people, schools, hospitals. And by the year 2002, he had written 458 books by automatic writing and sold 50 million books altogether. And all the proceeds went to the people of Brazil. No wonder they liked him. Excuse me, croaky throat.
Wow, Johnny, are you hearing this? I mean, this is absolutely amazing. And Tricia was bang on there because I certainly hadn't ever heard of automatic writing.
No, well, there's a lot more of that to come. And I go into that in detail and giving specifics, within the second book. Now, the content of the works that Chico Xavier wrote were vastly beyond his educational level and understanding. And since 1927, he spent 5 hours a day communing with his spirit guides. So dedicated was he to that. He was allowed to do that. Now, as I said, he wrote all these books and poems, and he never took a penny for himself. But being interested in the possible workings of what was going on himself, he was a very simple man. He took part with scientists in a brain test. You know what an electroencephalograph is? They put the things on your head and they trace your brain waves, in science. Mm-hmm. So they traced his brain waves as a normal man, Chico Xavier, and they traced his brain waves while he was doing the automatic writing. Now, they did what we call in science blind testing. So what they did was they took his brain waves and they took the brain waves while he was doing automatic writing, and they mixed them in with other people's brain waves. They knew what the code was, and they sent them away to a scientific laboratory for testing, asking if any of these brain waves any two were from the same person. And it came back categorically, in simple terms. It showed that, when he used the part of his brain for automatic writing, his brain waves were totally different to the personality that was Chico Xavier. And the scientists said, these are obviously not from the same person, but they were. But the people who were testing didn't know the circumstances. Now, Chico, he was a very simple man, as I said. Now, at the time, there was another eminent Brazilian scientist, Hermani Andrade, who was very interested in spiritual matters. Now, he was very well educated and he was much more ethereal about the whole thing, using very grand words and theories and all these sort of things. Now, when Andrade had just finished one of his books, and Chico had finished one of his books, someone came up to Chico and said, "What do you think of Andrade's new book?" And Chico said, "How would I know? I can't even understand my own." And that's the measure of the man. Now, Chico died in 2010, I think it was, at the age of 90. And what a fantastic man that he was. Another one I'm not going to go into because it's quite long and it's in the second book, is the case of Patience Worth. Now, Mrs. Curran that lived in Boston was the automatic writer who brought through this woman from 17th century England, Dorset. She wrote in Old English in the personality of this woman who called herself Patience Worth. Now, she was very keenly examined by scientists in America, one of them being Dr. Walter Franklin Pierce. And Franklin Pierce did not believe a single word of it when he started, and at the end he had to very grudgingly say, "No, this woman is not writing this. The stuff she wrote was way, way beyond the educational understanding of the Mrs. Curran, the simple American lady from Boston." So that's just simply 2 cases of automatic writing, but there are hundreds throughout the world of people who can do automatic writing.
That's definitely something that I'm going to be looking more into, Johnny, because again, a new topic and something else that I hadn't heard about is this art, the use of art as well, Tricia.
Yes, just before I leave the automatic writing, it's sort of joining in the automatic writing and the healing. You've probably heard of Arrigo, the surgeon of the rusty knife, down in Brazil again. Arrigo was a trade union leader, a bit like Arthur Scargill, one of the men, one for the people. And Arrigo had the gift of psychic surgery. Now, he did use a knife. He cut people to do the psychic surgery. And actually, I've not got that in the book, but there is a wonderful book called Arrigo, Surgeon of the Rusty Knife, and I do lectures, you see, I go around lecturing, and I have a whole lecture about psychic surgeons, and Arrigo and all the other psychic surgeons who do use a knife. We were asked, Guyline Playfair, who's another colleague of mine, he went down to Brazil for 2 years, and he asked them, have you ever had a case of septicemia or any bad reaction to your work? And they laughed and said, well, if we did, you'd have heard about it, because the government and the church are desperate to put them in jail for malpractice. But in 40 years of doing psychic surgery with blunt knives, they've never had one case of septicemia or poisoning. And that, as I say, once again, all the details are there in the books, etc., etc., etc. So maybe I'll write another book about psychic surgery, I don't know.
I mean, Tricia, just listening to you, I mean, you've wrote 2 books on this, but the evidence seems so abundant. There's a plethora of it out there.
And a wealth of evidence, a plethora indeed.
So, this art, how do we get into the art from here? Because you mentioned this during the break. Again, it was a new topic that I've not heard of.
Right. Well, we can go logically from writing with a piece of paper to painting. Now, there are many forms of psychic art. There's lots of them going about, like Coral Poge. There's a whole lot of people going around that claim to do psychic art. If they're mediumistic, they claim to tune in to a one-to-one with you, and then they do a drawing of the person that's passed over. That's what some people actually do. And I am making no comment as to the veracity of some of them. Some people seem very pleased. I can't really say. I had somebody do many, many years ago, someone did a psychic art drawing for me. In fact, they did 2, and I haven't a clue who either the people are. So once again, people listening to this, you've got to discern where you go. You've got to go to mediums have a good reputation, not necessarily the well-known ones, but people that you know individually that have a good reputation. Same if you're going to the doctor, the ordinary doctor, you would choose a doctor you liked. If you're going to a spiritual healer, go to somebody you like. If you're going to a psychic surgeon, get a recommendation before you do anything. It's the same with psychic art. Anything like that. But that's one type of psychic art. But there's a bizarre, I just think this is absolutely wonderful. There's a different psychic art. It's called precipitated art. Now, this is going to sound a contradiction, where the mediums don't actually put the paint on the paper. And I'll tell you about that. I'll give you an example. In America, many years ago, there was a couple of sisters called the Bang Sisters. Anyone listening, it was in the Victorian times. And these Bang Sisters were actually physical mediums, not what you and I would call psychic artists, although art did appear on a canvas. So what would happen was, you would go to visit the Bang Sisters looking for a painting of a loved one. You would go in, the sisters would be sitting side by side, and beside them would be an easel with a blank canvas on it. And you would just go in, sit down, and they would cover the canvas while you were there. They would concentrate, go into sort of a trance of some sort. 5 minutes later, they would lift the canvas up, and there would be a picture of the loved one there. You can actually find out about the Bang Sisters if you go into probably YouTube or something. But these things were witnessed by eminent people, that they could definitely do this type of psychic art. Now, I forgot to say that underneath the canvas was a little tray with little oil paints on the bottom.
Oh, but come on, get out of here. This is amazing.
It's worse, or better. The oil paints were never touched. And although some of the paints didn't appear to be touched, what went on the canvas was neither oil nor water. It's something that nobody can actually fathom out how that is actually done. They call it precipitated art because we don't know how else it happened. But there's worse to come. Because what the Bang Sisters could also do was, are you ready for this one?
Oh, I don't know.
You could go in with a blank piece of paper in an envelope. You could bring it in, a sealed envelope, and you could go and you could go and forget the art now. You could go in and sit with the Bang Sisters, and you could say, I would like a letter from a deceased person, somebody you knew well and you knew their handwriting, etc. And you would be sitting there, and remember it's in Victorian times, and you would sit there and there would be a bottle. You're probably too young to remember the wee bottles of ink, the wee black ink that you unscrewed the top. And
well,
you
I remember them because it was on my desk in school, but we never
That's
used
right.
it. Yeah.
That's right. I had it on my desk at school as well. So you know what I'm talking about. For those who don't know what it is or too young to remember, it's a little bottle of, it was navy blue, black ink, very liquidy. You would take the top off, you'd put a pen in it, you put ink in the nib, and you would write. That's how, if you were doing it, you would do it. So what you would do, you've got your blank envelope, you've got your piece of paper inside, you've got the bottle, the top of the bottle has been unscrewed, and you say to them, I'd like a letter from whatever, your mother, your father, whatever. And you would sit there quietly, and nobody touched anything. The bank sisters just sat there. You would sit there, and you would hear scratching noises coming from the inside of the envelope. And even weirder, you could sit and watch the ink level going down in the bottle of ink at the side at the same time. And when that stopped, you opened the envelope, and sure enough, was a letter written in your mother's handwriting and her signature at the bottom. Nobody touched that. You brought the paper in and the envelope.
Apart from being utterly terrifying and spooky and scary and all those things, how beautiful a story that is.
Well, wait till I tell you the rest of it. There's more to come. So, excuse me, croaky throat.
It's okay. It's this Kev Baker Show. You've been on Coast to Coast, but the Kev Baker Show,
exactly.
It's far,
Much better, yeah.
That's it.
Vice Admiral William Osborne Moore, who was Queen Victoria's cartographer, he was fascinated by the Bank Sisters. And at one point, the Bank Sisters came to the UK. I'm saying London, but I don't actually know that, but it was England anyway. And of course, as a cartographer, he was practiced at keeping immaculate records and was, of course, once again, a very keen observer. Now, this is around the time of Sir William Crookes as well, who was a chemist. So what Osborne Moore did, he wrote to William Crookes and he asked him to prepare a special ink which incorporated ingredients not usually in ink. And William Crookes diligently did that. He brought special ink to Osborne Moore, and Osborne Moore went to the Bank Sisters with this special ink, and he told them, is it all right if I use my own ink? And they said, yes, that's fine. So once again, he brought the blank sheet of paper, an envelope, a bottle with the top off. I'm not actually quite sure if there was a pen there or not, but we'll just presume there was a pen. It doesn't really matter. The ink's the most important thing. And once again, Osborne Moore sat there, and they could hear scratching coming from the inside of the envelope. You could see the level going down in the bottle of ink. And that was fine. There was a message from somebody he knew. That was fine. So what he did then was he posted the letter off to William Crookes. And William Crookes analysed the ink in that letter, and it was indeed the ink that Osborne Moore had brought with him.
That's what we're talking about, Tricia.
That's what we're talking about.
Evidence. Yeah. Exactly. This is amazing.
Evidence. That is amazing. That is totally and utterly.
Johnny Whistles, I mean, what are you thinking right now? Because I'd never heard anything like this, and I thought I was well-versed in all things woo.
Yeah, Kev, I thought that as well, but now I'm actually hearing about psychic surgery, psychic writing, and psychic art. 3 things, Kev. Honestly, never ever heard before in my life, and it's absolutely fascinating, some of these things.
And I'm not just saying this for effect because your new book's out today, but I think this is going to be a must read, especially for the listeners to this show, because Twitter's going mad right now. You're putting chills down people's spines, but in the chat room, Tricia, people are resonating with this so much.
Can I just tell you that it's so that I've only actually touched on this. We did 40 hours of talks, lectures, etc. at the university. Now, people, when they signed up for this psychical research course, you could see them coming in the first day and they're kind of going, what's going on here? Don't really know what to expect. And by the end of the 40 hours, nobody wanted to go home. They just wanted to stay there,
I'm
all
looking
the
at
time.
the clock here on the network, and I'm
I know.
thinking, why do you have to go so quickly? But Tricia, I'm shameless, and we will definitely be getting you back on so many times, as many times as we can have you. But
the best thing,
on you go.
The best thing to do is to actually seriously pick one topic, and and maybe do that for half an hour or 20 minutes, so you can go into it in more depth. Because I've only touched on it, and of course everything we've said very quickly here, people if they want can pick holes in it, and that's fine. But if you are going to buy the book, I would suggest you buy things you can do when you're dead first. It gives you an introduction to it, and if you fancy it, then you can go on and buy the second book, and that goes a wee bitty deeper. Now you can and start. It's to sound daft. Start at the beginning and go to the end. Now, one thing I've not even mentioned, I start with in the second book, is materialization within a seance, where figures are produced and come out a cabinet and speak to you.
Is this the kind of ectoplasm thing we hear about, or is this more physical?
They call it that. You could call it sugary daddy. You could call it anything you like, but there's certainly something forms into a figure, and that figure can walk about. Somebody has given it the name ectoplasm. One of the things we suffer very badly from in psychical research is definitions. For example, I gave you the example of poltergeist activity. You've got to watch what you're talking about. All poltergeist activity is not the same. And I've got some really funny stories to do with that as well, which of course we don't have time to do.
But we will be getting you back, Tricia.
Some of them may involve a little sweary word here and there, but that's all part and parcel.
That's okay right here, Johnny Whistles, isn't it, man?
Yeah, I was just going to say, these, the seance where one actually appears, does everybody at the seance see this thing as well?
Correct.
Yeah.
I've got 200 people at the same time all saw the same thing at the same time from their own perspective in Glasgow Association of Spiritualists. And it happened just before I get into this, 1975, from a wonderful English medium called Gordon Higginson. And I knew Gordon, and I have seen Gordon later doing his ordinary mediumship, which he was fantastic at. But I missed the materialization.
Well, Tricia, unfortunately, we are right out of time. So we can find Tricia's work at triciarobertson.weebly.com. I must thank you for your time tonight. And wow, what a guest. Amazing stuff. Now stay tuned, folks.
Can I just say sleep well?
Oh, I don't know about that. Stay tuned, because Joe Joseph, he's going to be going live with Phoenix from Phoenix Rising Radio right here on the network, of course, and Mr. Ken Hildebrand from Information Nation. So don't go anywhere. And yeah, keep the light on tonight, folks. Tricia Robertson, amazing stuff. Wherever you are, make it TFR.
And didn't touch that dial.